Okay. So I will call this meeting of the Salem Keizer Budget Committee to order and ask Christie to take the roll.
Rachel Dewey Thorsett.
Here.
Rick Kimball.
Here.
Marcia Atkinson.
Here.
Mark Bateman.
Here.
Chris Brantley.
Here.
Lloyd Chapman.
Here.
Marty Hyen. Here. Jim Green. Here. Levy Herrera Lopez.
Here.
Adam Kohler will not be with us this evening. Paul Kylo.
Here.
Chuck Lee.
Here.
Nancy McMorris Audix. Here. Betty Patacoli. Here.
And one word to committee members, the community TV person asked me to remind you all to speak into your microphones. So, okay. So the first item on the agenda is public testimony, and I think Christie is getting the list of people who have signed up. We currently have 4 people signed up, and the first one is Rita Glass.
Good evening, Superintendent Perry, board members, and budget committee members. My name is Rita Glass. I reside at 4384 Falcon View Way Northeast, Salem 97305. And as I was reflecting on the testimony of last evening, it really hit me that this district has become very committed in looking at everything we do through an equity lens. And I just want to share that my hopes is that you as elected officials and appointed budget committee members would also have that same commitment in reviewing the proposed budget and in adopting a budget for our district through the equity lens as we work harder than ever to close the achievement gap and to really serve those students that are underserved in our schools at this time. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. And the next person is Olivia Palazzo Angulo, who I saw step out just a second ago. So let's move on to Angel Reyes, and we'll come back to Olivia when she gets back. Angel Reyes?
He's coming.
Ah, okay. Oh, okay. Okay. So, okay, well, since you're back, you're number 2, so, okay.
And I do have these to pass out. Okay, good evening, everyone. Chair of the Budget Committee, I forgot who you were. There,
Rachel.
see, Rachel, and so I didn't write it, I left it blank. So good evening, Chair, Rachel. Dewey Thorsett, okay. And are you related to President Thorsett of
Yep.
Willamette University?
Married to him.
I wondered. That's great. Okay. And Superintendent Perry, I'm Olivia Palazzo Angulo at 3644 31st Avenue Northeast, Salem 97301. As the Executive Director of the Salem Keizer Coalition for Equality, I want to express our appreciation to the district administration for the careful attention to detail they have given to create this budget that protects all our children's education while facing cuts to our state education budget. Even so, these projections are based on a moving target. Oregon has one of the most ineffective school funding methods in the nation, and we commend all of you for spending the months and months it has taken to get to this point. A balanced budget despite uncertainty, controversy, and partisan politics. We appreciate the district's positive attitude under these circumstances that never cease in Oregon. with its ineffective school funding model. We have made our voice known to the state year after year about the issue of school funding and advocated for school funding to be Oregon's top priority. Oregon needs to wake up to the fact that we are budgeting in our good years on a school system that has the shortest school year. We are making cuts to a school budget that is, in its best years, is still not serving our children with a top-notch education. We heard the superintendent's call for us to write our legislators, and we did so once again, as we have every year for the past 17 years. To speak to this budget specifically, I have a list of bullet points to mention. We strongly support the intentions of the district to continue with the EL realignment work in the strategic plan. We support your solution to move Title I-A funds to schools instead of central office. I've heard we might lose 10% of our federal funds, including Title I and Title III. I trust your ability to make this move. We understand and support the rationale for moving English language acquisition staff from central offices to school-based language support staff. Again, we know what ideal is, and we know we simply cannot have it, so it sounds like the most logical solution. We support your continued commitment to the professional development and equity training goals on the strategic plan, which are to provide standards-based, data-driven professional learning for all employees, including culturally relevant practices and job-embedded instructional mentoring for teachers. We ask you, and we cannot emphasize it enough, to put every effort into coming up with creative or innovative ways to fulfill this goal, including using alternative methods that could have the same impact for less cost, and including parents and community members as part of the strategies. We want to raise the issue of diversified workforce. We can't emphasize that enough either. To keep up the momentum on the strong work the HR department has been doing to diversify the workforce, this issue connects closely with professional development and culturally relevant practices. Research continually shows us year after year the impact of culturally relevant practices and a highly effective diverse workforce in increasing the success and graduation of all students, specifically students of color. We are glad to see the recognition of the district in the what office that I could not remember. The need for equity by creating an Office of Equity and promoting Cynthia Richardson. I had a few blanks there, but we really, really appreciate it, and I'm just so delighted that we have an Office of Equity. You can't imagine. And I met with Patrick and Linda Myers. They're just unbelievable, awesome people. So thank you. We still have significant disparities in the district, and we just want to remind you that SKCE has been a partner and resource to the education of our children for many years. We know that parents are one of the most important keys to the success of their children, and we have worked with over 6,000 parents, all Spanish-speaking immigrants, to improve our district and student outcomes. And we will continue to be a partner in the foreseeable future. Thank you for your partnership.
Thank you. Now, Angel Reyes.
Buenas tardes. Buenas tardes, superintendente y miembros del comité del consejo escolar.
Good afternoon, Superintendent and members of the School Board Committee.
Mi nombre es Ángel Reyes y como padre de los programas de la Coalición para la Igualdad de Salem Keizer,
My name is Angel Reyes, and as a parent of the Salem Keizer Coalition for Equality,
yo voy a hablarles hoy sobre los valores de hablar español.
I am going to speak now regarding the values of speaking the Spanish language.
No podemos perder nuestra cultura, sobre todo nuestro idioma español.
We cannot lose our culture and overall our Spanish language.
El español es muy importante en todo lo que es Latinoamérica.
Spanish is very important in all Latin American.
Influye mucho en nuestra sociedad y en nuestra educación.
It has a lot of influence in our society and in our education.
Hoy en día el americano quiere aprender español y sobre todo que sus hijos lo hablen también.
Nowadays, many Americans want to learn Spanish, and they want their children to learn Spanish as well.
También influye mucho en nuestro trabajo y en lo que hacemos.
Spanish also influences a lot in our jobs and what we do.
El español es un lenguaje o idioma con el que nos identificamos como cultura hispana.
Spanish is a language from which we identify as a culture.
El americano quiere aprender otras culturas y otros idiomas, entre ellos el español,
Many Americans want to learn other cultures and languages and Spanish as well,
porque quiere comunicarse con los demás y hablar también nuestro lenguaje para poder comunicarse.
because they want to communicate with everybody and they want to speak our language to communicate.
Así que el español hoy en día ha cruzado fronteras
Spanish has trespassed borders
y es uno de los lenguajes más hablados en Estados Unidos.
and is one of the most spoken languages in the United States.
Cuando hablamos de cultura, hablamos de un ingrediente indispensable para hablar español.
When we speak about culture, we speak about a special ingredient to speak Spanish.
Aprender un lenguaje es aprender la cultura de la gente.
To learn another language is to learn another culture
Y sus diferentes maneras de expresarse.
and the different ways of expression.
Yo quisiera que mi hija no perdiera su cultura y sobre todo su lenguaje español,
I would like that my daughter won't lose her Spanish, her culture,
y que por medio de su español ella ayudara a los demás y pudiera trascender en las diferentes culturas que hay.
and because of her Spanish language, she could be able to help everybody.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And the fourth person on the list is John Yoder.
Good evening, Superintendent Perry, board members, and members of the Budget Committee. My name is John Yoder, and I reside at 7810 Spring Valley Road, Salem, Oregon, 97304. And I'm here tonight to ask that the two science specialists be part of the school budget. I want to start by saying that there's a number of initiatives that are ongoing that would be difficult to maintain without them, but my comments tonight really focus more on comments around the strategic plan, particularly K-5 literacy. I think that's critical, as well as opportunities of offering better educational opportunities for our English as second language students. So those two things I'd like to frame around the need for science, and I'm going to show you I'm going to connect those here in a little bit. First, I think there's a false choice that we have about literacy or science, literacy or social studies. Had the opportunity to attend COSA, a Confederation of School Administrators Conference several years ago, where they showed research and learning styles of successful schools and learning. So I'll just read briefly a couple of those. Literacy standards or strategies need to be connected in the context of content. Learning needs a context. Literacy needs to be scaffolded and taught within content areas. Inquiry as a vehicle for learning provides engagement and motivation, two critical pieces. Those were some of the ideas that were presented by those researchers and those presenters. I want to highlight two examples. Dr. Wendy Rosalinsky from Jeffers Elementary School in Las Vegas, 86% Hispanic, 100% free and reduced lunch go to that school. Their theme, science every day in every grade. They've showed dramatic increases in performance. Jerry Valdez from Yacomi Elementary in Fresno, California, 32% English language learners, 94% minority, 100% free and reduced lunch. Their K-2 students have 40 minutes of science per day, followed by 40 minutes of literacy in science per day. Grades 3 and 5, that's 60 minutes of each of those. They've showed doubling of results for their performance and proficiency, both in reading and math. A small Appalachian town in the east that was low in math, one of the lowest, went and did some contextualized instruction with math and celebrated being one of the top math schools in the state with a parade downtown with their banner and all. So it's not either or, and in fact, I would make the case that literacy for K-5 can be best improved by putting it in the context of subject areas, particularly science. J-GEMS is a local example. Charter school with scores that near the top of our district. Their focus? Science. Heavy focus on science. I have a daughter that was trained in art, and she went to school here and was a student teacher at McKay. She now teaches in Virginia because they don't have art teachers here. Every elementary school has an art teacher. Every middle school has an art teacher. They're required to take art in middle school. They have a rich suite of science and social studies, so there's other schools, other places that are somehow, with populations like ours, able to have a rich and varied curriculum. This makes a big difference for our ELL students as well as others. I've had the opportunity to travel the country and provide professional development in Michigan over a 5-year period of time, working throughout the state, working with staffs and community members on developing contextualized programs. I did this in Kentucky, Indiana, New York, California over about a 10 to 15-year period of time. Saw tremendous results. I was often asked, what do you do in your district? I've kind of had to say, well, we don't do so much of that. In fact, we really don't have a lot of science and social studies at our elementary schools. These were rich programs, varied programs. So there are other ways I think we can reach our strategic goal around getting our students to read and write by embedding it in content where it's engaging and it means something. I think doing more of the same, offering more time over and over of the same and expecting different results perhaps needs to be re-examined. I think our science PAs could be involved in that kind of work. I think the school board could encourage in the strategic plan to include literacy through content areas as a strategic plan to move us forward in addressing all of our students and their needs around science and literacy. So I hope that you can put those positions back and you can look at contextualizing our literacy. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. So that is the end of the people who have signed up for public testimony. Is there anyone else who would like to? Okay. In that case, we move on to committee deliberations. And just to point out to everybody that there are handouts attached to your agenda answering a couple of the questions that came up last night. The blocks, the schedule for the elementary schools and a graphic of it, and the job description of the science specialist. And then we also had a question on how much it would cost to lower class size by one, was it K2?
K2.
K2?
Oh, I'm sorry, I did the numbers. K3 is $1.5 million for K3, 16 FTE.
So it would probably be something.
Something a little
like-
less.
Like 3/4 of that.
Mhm.
Okay, so ballpark a little bit over $1 million.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, Paul?
Would that be adding, what'd you say, how many positions would that be?
For the K3 numbers, it's 16 positions.
So would that be adding those 16 back into the budget? So we would only be eliminating 9.25 elementary positions?
If you were adding those back to the budget, yes.
Okay, that's what I
Yep.
was trying to make sure, since we're eliminating 25 there. So to reduce the class size at that level, we'd need 15. Okay.
Are there other questions? Mark?
Looking at the, at this sheet, the master schedule sheet.
Correct.
I'm looking down at the bottom part. So you have a line that says total required time in grade K5 is 6 hours and 30 minutes. Can you explain the relationship between the required in that line and the data down below that says which schools are at what total time?
So we took as we build master schedules at the elementary school, these are our kind of defined instructional block times, and then we put in some of the other things. And as you see, if you got in every single thing here, we don't have enough minutes in the day. So then schools have to work to where do you shave off those minutes. And sometimes you do that during the lunch and recess times to squish those together. But what you see at the bottom is really a wide range of instructional time. ideally, we would get all elementary schools to 6 hours and 40 minutes to get done the things that we know we need to get done in the school day.
So who's making the decision in each building what the actual instructional time is in that building?
The full instructional time,
Well,
On the bottom?
The very bottom, yeah.
yeah, transportation. It's a transportation issue.
And so this may not be a fair question to ask on short notice, but what would be the transportation cost of getting all of the buildings up to 6 hours and 40 minutes?
That would be a huge question. And every year we try to shrink the footprint of our time between secondary and elementary schools so that we can get greater time and get those numbers closer together. But it would be a lot, but I don't have it offhand.
And I would also add that we'd have to take a look at the whole system. We couldn't just focus on increasing time at one level because they're all interconnected in the routing. So it would be a district-wide approach to add time at the elementary level as well. It's a big issue.
We have done some work around can you get high school start times later, and can you flip the start times? And we've done some work around that. And in that exercise, we were trying to also standardize all the elementary times, and that just for that exercise, it became in the 19 to 25 additional buses and routes, so millions of dollars.
And so the required total time is 6 hours and 30 minutes, but the schools that are under that aren't out of compliance?
Yeah, I think we've got the wrong word here with required.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
this is kind of here's our recommended time for each of these,
Okay.
and then schools have to shift their schedules based on that.
So it isn't a state requirement?
No,
or
all
any-
of our schools, even our 23 elementary schools that are at 6 hours and 15 minutes are within the instructional minutes of the state.
Okay,
Yep. Sorry, that was the wrong word there.
okay. Lloyd?
On that same sheet, intervention is listed, and then there, on the second sheet, it talks about literacy intervention. Are those equivalent, or is
Those
it
are
something else?
equivalent, yes. And this is just one example of one school, and so that's how they labeled it. But we are asking our elementary schools to provide time within their schedule so that when kids don't get the material the first time, that there's some sort of reteaching that happens, so that we're not waiting and allowing kids to get behind. So it's that double dose of instruction.
And what is happening for the kids who do get it the first time?
Enrichment.
Okay. Other questions? Nancy?
So when I see literacy listed a number of times on the master schedule, and I hear the conversation from both the testimony and from budget committee members about literacy, it appears to me that our literacy instruction is something that when I was in school was called English, and we read poetry and stories, fiction, and that was what literacy, that you changed the word, versus something that I have understood to some extent in the boardroom from different presentations is that a huge effort in literacy is developing academic language, a significant increase in reading nonfiction. So if that's the case, then is our assumption that when we see literacy, that all that's being read is what I remember, if this was a kindergarten or first grade class, what I remember is the Dick and Jane books that were just these stories about this nice little family and their pets, but not anything really instructive, versus are we getting content in literacy that is other than just learning how to read those words.
All right, so I'm going to answer, and then I'm going to see if Linda or Lisa has anything to add. Literacy is the second thing you're describing. It's not just the Dick and Jane books, but it is about developing academic language. It is about nonfiction reading at times. There is fiction reading. There's also writing. And one of the things we have done is we have aligned the next generation science standards to our new Ready Gen adoption so that teachers can see where those fit. And there is quite a bit of nonfiction actually, because we are really boosting the academic language. So that's why we really do need 90 minutes for reading, because we're doing so much more than sight reading, which is what you described with the Dick and Jane books. There is sight reading that's one piece and that independent reading, but there's also that building of the academic language and the writing as well, and with lots of nonfiction reading and writing.
Other questions, comments? Okay. So, in that case, does anybody want to make proposals about possible changes, or Lloyd?
I really appreciated the conversation last night. I thought we started and broadened it out to the whole issue of funding of education and the inadequacy of the funding of education. And I think there was pretty general consensus that that's where we are, and we're dealing with a difficult thing. Jim got a little emotional last night, and I appreciated that. I know you work hard for this district and for the school system. And thank you for that, and thank you for that emotion, because we need it to build support for this. I think my role in the Budget Committee is to try and match up the school district budget, which is written to DOE standards and isn't anything like the way one would think about a budget for a school district, and what I understand community priorities to be. This budget had a increased implementation of the PBIS, the personal behavior model. I've seen those problems in schools, and I think that was an important investment. I've always questioned why we had a range of teaching instructional coaches, we had mentors, we had effective learning teachers, or some other title that I'm probably getting wrong. And we were combining those. And I thought that that was a good place to be. But when I'm looking at the budget, we started talking last night about almost starting over. Let's go back to the beginning, and what would we do? That's not how I look at a budget. I look at a budget and say, and I go through it, every page of it, and I say, where are significant adds, where are significant reductions? Does that make sense to me or not? That's the process I've used for 6 years on this committee. And so there are a number of them, and I have understood them, and I value them. But there's no line. I don't know what the reduction line is that is 2 science associates. I don't know if it's 7 teacher on special assignment reductions. Is that it? Okay. But just because I happen to, I learned what that was, and that really troubled me. I was a participant in the March for Science because I think it's important. I think it's something that it's important to do. And I think it's important to the community. Last night, Jim mentioned the results policy. Your results policy, the district's results policy, talks about reading, writing, English language acquisition, math, and science. How many specialists do we have providing guidance on math, or reading, or writing, or English language acquisition? I suspect we have any number. And this budget proposes none for science. I think that's wrong. And I don't have, we are under instructions to say where this money is to come from. It's a part of the process that I think is flawed. I don't really want to make a recommendation of where you cut. I want to tell you that from my perspective, science funding, $250,000 for 2 science program assistants is more important than something on the budget and probably something on the ad list. And I would probably ask for more information about the increase in instructional coaches and also the elementary literacy curriculum piece that is in the ad section of the budget. And if you want me to select one, I will, but I would like to, do I need to make a motion here?
We don't have a proposal in front of us.
Okay, so, I mean, before we could make a change, we would need to have a motion with what you would like to see added and where you think the
Okay.
change might come from.
Could I ask for a clarification on those 2 programs, additions, the instructional mentors had to increase and the elementary literacy curriculum?
So the instructional mentors increase is a result of the removal, the going away of the Oregon Mentor Grant. So the Oregon Mentor Grant was about $2.2 million. That grant, as we know it right now, will not be funded. So we put in the general fund 3 instructional mentors so that we had some district-wide support to still work on some district-wide support for mentoring of our new teachers. We have 3 in the general fund. We have 2 out of Title II, which is an allowable, so that that gets us a start of at least 5 district-wide instructional mentors that can solely focus on our first and second year teachers. So that's ad number 1, and as a result of the mentor program going away, not adequate. The second question is around the funding for some additional reading curriculum. That is around the foundational reading materials. So much of your phonics work that is a complement that's aligned with Ready Gen. So it's like a K2 foundational reading skills piece that we think is really important in those younger grades.
Nancy?
I just want to clarify, it's my understanding that what appears like an ad of mentors is not an ad, but a takeaway. Is that accurate?
That's accurate.
Rick?
That's exactly what I was going to ask.
And how many mentors were funded by the grant?
17 to 19.
So in that case, what's happening is we're going from 17 to 19 grant funded to 5.
5 between title and general. Yes.
Okay. Lloyd?
I'll move that the Budget Committee add 2 science program assistants to the budget and delete funding from the elementary literacy curriculum program to balance that ad.
Okay. Is there a second? Seeing none, I'm afraid it fails. Okay, so are there any other proposals? Marcia?
I just have a question. You talked about instructional mentors, right? Do any of the mentors specialize in science?
Good question. It really, and I don't have the answer. I know in the 19 there was, some that might have had a science background, but I don't have the exact answer.
Any other proposals for changes? Is there a motion to adopt the budget as written then?
There's no other changes.
What was that?
If there are no other changes, there is a motion.
Okay, would you like to make it?
If there are no other changes. Okay. Be it moved on May 23rd, 2017, that the Budget Committee of the Salem Keizer School District, 24J/32, Marion, Polk Counties, Oregon, approves the proposed budget as revised by the superintendent on May 9th, 2017 for the 2017-18 fiscal year in the amount of $683,020,682, and approves property taxes for the 2017-18 fiscal year at the rate of $4.5210 per $1,000 of assessed value for the permanent tax rate levy in support of the general fund, and in the amount of $28,500,000 for the general obligation bonds levy.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Is there any further discussion? Chuck?
I think because I'm going to be abstaining, mainly because I tried to contact our legal counsel today, and with my involvement with CTEC and with CTEC being a portion of the budget, I think I'm going to abstain from this until I get a chance to talk to our legal counsel to see, even though I have no financial advantage or interest in the decision, I just think for purposes of this, I will abstain, and when and if it goes to the full board, I'll be able to participate probably.
Nancy?
This is a really difficult decision for me. It's, I believe strongly that science is essential to learning. It's very hard to make these cuts. Nobody, I don't think, maybe some people do run for school board to slash and burn the school budget, but I certainly didn't. I feel like it's essential that we come to a place where we can adequately fund our schools, and we're not there, and we're making horrible choices year after year after year, and makes me really, really angry. I think that it would be really helpful for parents and community members to understand the balance in the literacy in elementary school, to understand how much of the literacy curriculum is nonfiction, how much of it really is social sciences, how much of it is natural sciences, that would be a really helpful thing for the community to understand, because I don't believe that the 30 minutes several days a week is all the science that's happening in elementary school, but until we have kind of a better read on that with understanding what that curriculum has, I can't really say that. I do think science is important. I do think more science would be good, but I don't think that we have a long enough school day. I don't think we have a long enough school year. I don't think we have enough funding for all the kinds of positions we need. I think we have too many children in our classrooms. I could go on and on and on and on and on. So that said, it's a bitter pill to swallow, but I will support this budget.
Marty?
And I wanted to say, too, that I really support science. I wish we had more science in our school. My son was lucky enough to go to JGEMS and have a good science education. At some point in the future, I hope that we can incorporate maybe some of the things we heard today that, about putting the science and the literacy together and getting more science for our younger kids. I think that would be awesome if we could do that at some point.
Jim?
First, on the advice of legal counsel, I do have to declare declare potential conflict of interest on the executive director of the Oregon School Boards Association. Dues from this budget go to pay Salem Keizer's dues in that association. So that is a potential conflict of interest according to our legal counsel. And secondly, on the budget as a whole, I want to remind the Budget Committee that this is a proposed budget at $8.1 billion. According to what we hear at the Capitol now, that's the minimum that people are talking about. So if this budget comes in higher, I would like to make sure that the public and the other members of the Budget Committee who don't sit on the board understand that I know we as a board will be asking, if this number comes in higher, for recommendations in a hierarchical order from the administration on what would we add back into this budget. Even at an 8.4 or an 8.6 or an 8.8, it won't be adequate to do everything we want to do. Unfortunately, there are choices that have to be made in this budget environment. They're not choices anyone I know got elected to the board to do, Nancy, but I know as this board member would make a promise to the public in the Budget Committee, if it comes in higher and the assumptions that we're making in this budget aren't accurate, we would ask the administration and our budget team, Mike and his staff, to come back with recommendations for what we would do to improve all opportunities for kids in this school district.
Mark?
I think one of the real difficulties for us and the community at large in this process is that the board has adopted a strategic plan, which is great, but it's a very, I would describe as a very blunt instrument. It only has a limited number of items in it, and there's a whole lot of complexity that resides in this budget, and we don't have the time to tear apart and understand exactly every position and how it lines up to the strategic plan. And so I think some of the frustration that that we have expressed as a group is this sense that, well, you as staff had to make trade-offs, and we want to understand exactly what those trade-offs were. And so at the end of the day, I'm trusting staff, with us having poked at things, that you in fact made the right trade-offs. But the frustration you hear this year and every year is that this is a really compressed period of time to try and understand the complexity and share with the board, who ultimately will adopt the budget, and with staff, where that complexity is and what the priorities of the community are. So I'll be adopting this, but I'm with Nancy. I don't like this. It's too hard and there are too many trade-offs. And we've got to, I think the community needs a better understanding of some of the complexity and how those trade-offs, as represented by the strategic plan, are actually being made, and where, I mean, in essence, the question was asked yesterday. So if staff could add 2 positions back, where would you add those positions? It would have been interesting to have more time to be able to have some of that kind of conversation and really understand how is it that the science positions actually dropped all the way to the bottom of this list.
Does the process allow for the budget committee to be reconvened if the revenue comes in higher? Or
No. No. Once the budget committee approves the budget tonight, your official role is complete, and then it becomes board action in the future. And I have a handout I'll pass out when we're done that talks about the supplemental budget process, that if we did receive additional revenue, as Jim hopefully described will happen, the board would make the appropriations of where that money could be spent through resolution at that time.
Lloyd?
I'm still debating, but I suspect I'll vote no on the budget. It strikes me that if we can't, I don't believe in my 6 years on the committee we have ever made a change to a proposed budget. And it makes me really question what our role is if we can't do that. If the process doesn't create a vehicle that we as a citizens committee, who's supposed to bring a different perspective to the board and to the superintendent. And that saddens me and frustrates me, and I agree with Mark, but I suspect that's what my vote will be.
Other comments?
Just one final one. I want to thank Mike and his staff for their work on the budget. I've served on this committee since 2008, and this budget was much easier to read and much easier to understand than the notebook that I took home last year. So Mike, to you and your staff, thanks for all your hard work on this and making this budget document, at least for this member, a little easier to read and understand this year. I appreciate that.
Well, I'd turn it all over to Sarah Head and her staff, and we have Heather and Candy in the back, Annalee, and some others. So thank you, I appreciate that. Good recognition.
I'll just make a couple of comments. On the science issue, I'm very torn on this since science is close to my heart. And what I found myself feeling was, I think science is really important. But what I want more than to put those two positions back, and this is veering a little ways from the budget committee role, is for the staff and the board to be looking at a real plan for science, given the financial constraints that make it difficult to provide central support. And so I would hope that as the new next generation science standards come into place, that it really becomes clear that there is a thoughtful approach to how the science time that's set aside is used, and how that aligns with any literacy time that is used to support science. And so I hope that going forward, I mean, to me, that is a much bigger piece of what needs to happen than simply putting two positions back. And, I think it's possible that as the budget changes, that those will be part of that, but that's sort of where my priorities in science would lie. And the second is that in some ways I agree with Lloyd that the process that we have in place makes it very difficult for us to actually change anything. So one of the things before we leave today, but hopefully after we deal with this motion, is that we will talk a little bit about what we might do going forward to make it at least a process that seems more where we feel that we can weigh in more effectively. So, but that's getting far afield from the motion. So are there any other comments on the motion? So the motion, as I understand it, takes 8 affirmative votes to pass. I'm not actually sure how the abstention counts in that, but we still need 8. Okay. So, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
Nay.
Abstentions? Okay, so by my count, that is subtracting from 13, 1 no, 1 abstention, and 11 ayes, in which case the motion passes. And we have approved a budget, or we have recommended a budget to the full board for approval. And so the last item on the agenda is next steps, and in that, I think this is where we can talk a little bit about what both we would like to see happen, in terms of weighing in on issues if there is a supplemental budget, and I think even more importantly, what we would like to see happen next year in order to feel that we're getting both the information we need early enough and how community input can come in early enough in the process that people feel that they can have an impact. So, Nancy?
Several years ago, we had a process, I think 2 years running, where 1 year we looked at the different aspects of the district by department, like maybe elementary, secondary, IT, curriculum. It seemed like a number of, and we had reports from all of those. And in those reports, the presenters were tasked with saying, if it's a very rosy financial year, where would be the places in this budget that we would add if we could to get the biggest bang for our buck? And if, on the other hand, it's another year like all the years seem to be, where would we be cutting? And those were presented through the year in a manner that the Budget Committee was able to sit together, ask questions. It was very educational. You're going to have quite a number of new people at the table. I think it would be a really good process for the board to look at, or the Budget Committee to look at some sort of process of education through the next year. And that would be my recommendation. Not that you have to listen to me, because I'm quite a short timer here.
So, Chris?
A couple of months ago, the board had one work session where we started to take a look at Superintendent Perry's request at the, ultimately, the results policy. It wasn't, we didn't really get there yet, but it was starting to look at what might we measure that we aren't now measuring, and how might that be part of the results policy. I heard a pretty clear statement last night from a number of the Budget Committee members and a couple of the board members that there is a desire to see social studies and science in some way measured so that it gains some value and starts to be part of the results policy and then part of the strategic plan, and therefore finds its way into the budget in a meaningful way, that the educators figure out how that's going to work. And I would just recommend to anybody that's on the Budget Committee to keep your ear to the ground on that process, because as you heard last night, that's what drives this process, and that's what drives them in their process of putting this budget together. I, too, just cringe when I vote yes on a budget like that, because, the other thing that I'll just say is that Salem Noor went out and did his tour of the state, went to all over the state, and listened to parents talk about the report card primarily, and what we measure and how we go about pushing our schools, and found that throughout the state there was a call on the part of parents that kids have a more diverse education, that it not be just reading, writing, and arithmetic, but rather those kinds of integrative subjects that actually help kids understand why they read and why they write and why they compute. So I just hope that the community gets behind that effort to take a look at that, both at the state and at the district level, because I think that's what's going to change this budget ultimately.
Jim?
So I'm generally not one to advocate for more meetings, but I do echo what Nancy said years ago. This budget committee would meet almost every month or every other month, even before budget season had began, to operate and get the understanding of the programs that were being presented, the opportunities that we had, or the deficits that we had, and how we would address those. I think Nancy's exactly right. We will have 3 brand new school board members that will be sitting on our board here in a couple of months. Some of you that are on the budget committee may not want to be reappointed. Maybe you do, I don't know. I think it was a good opportunity. I remember being a brand new budget committee member, and it helped with that process. Nancy's right, we had the level directors present on their various levels at the elementary, middle, and high school, talked about special education, talked about transportation, talked about a variety of issues that were facing the district at the time. It was a great way to understand what we had done to put the budget together as a staff at that time, prior to it coming to the budget committee. I think that's a process that we ought to look at reinstating, so that there is that buy-in, and Mark, it may address some of the issues that you brought up. Not saying that you don't understand the budget, but don't understand the decisions that led to the way the budget was put together. And having that informational background helped me as a rookie budget committee member, helped me as a rookie school board member as well as we did that. So I guess maybe I am advocating for more meetings, but I don't think having the opportunity for the public to hear more, or for our volunteers, either as budget committee members or school board members, understand that process better is a bad thing.
No, thank you. Chuck?
I also remember those sessions, and those were very good. I also remember us taking time to have what we call listening sessions, where we would have different groups from the community come in, and we would just sit. We wouldn't respond, but we would just listen to the faith community about their concerns or their thoughts. We had the business community come in and talk about their concerns and their visions for education. So I think we had 6 or 7 different listening sessions where we had community people come in and talk about their vision and wishes and concerns about the district. And I found that valuable as a new board member too.
Mark?
I mean, I agree with everything that's been said in terms of more information and briefings and giving people, both who are serving on the committee and the board and the community at large, a better understanding of process. But I'd take it a step further and say that this should be an annual part of the process. It's not a one-time training and suddenly then everybody knows, because the reality is that staff make decisions every year in the proposed budget that are trade-offs. And what I'm seeking to understand is the nature of those trade-offs in your own thinking, based on the input that you've gotten from the community, based on the direction that you've gotten from the board, and based on the strategic plan as it currently exists. One of the things that was hard for me about the science discussion tonight was, so what was drastically different between the strategic plan a year ago, when science specialists were in the budget, and the strategic plan this year, where now they're not in the budget? So it's those kinds of conversations that I think the whole community needs to be having, understanding the trade-offs that are involved in assembling this budget. And it's not that anything's right or wrong. These are wrong versus wrong, or right versus right decisions. They are hard decisions, they are trade-offs, and we need everybody to have a better understanding of the thinking that went into the specific trade-offs. So I think a series of meetings with the briefings that have been described, but also in more granular detail, your thought process and staff's thought process of how did you arrive at this set of recommendations?
Yeah, years ago when I served on the budget advisory team, we did the same thing. We spent about 6-7 months listening to people from different departments and really learning about everything before we even made, the budget advisory team at that time was making recommendations to the budget committee, which that's a different conversation. But for us to take those 6-7 months of learning about each program and how those decisions were made was very, very helpful. So I just want to support those comments. And if we did move in that direction, I do agree with Mark that it has to be a continuous process, not just a one-time thing.
Rick?
So after 12 years of doing this, I get to say that I'm the one who's done the most, sat on the budget committee the most, let's put it that way. I think, and I'd have to dig out the book, 7 or 8 of those years has been negative. You know, that's what the biggest driver, the biggest problem of all this. We wouldn't be as frustrated about what roles we're losing and we can't keep if the money was there every year. That's where our biggest challenges have been in budgeting when we've had to cut. You know, what are we cutting? Is it the right thing or not? And that's the tragic part of this. It'd been nice if they were all positive years and we wouldn't have had to make these hard decisions, but that's the way we're operating in Oregon right now, and that needs to change somewhere down the road. We did add something back at one time, though. It was swimming. And the Budget Committee had that discussion and drove that decision, but I know that's not like science specialists, but.
And it was budget neutral.
And boy, was it painful. The process, not the adding it back. Can we do this sort of short of a formal motion to say that the sense of the committee is that we would like to have approximately monthly workshops on different aspects of the budget?
How about if staff provides a plan?
Okay.
We've taken the input. I've got some good notes. We've got it recorded. Give us some time to think it through.
Any further comments? Levy?
One last comment. Quiero agradecerle a las personas que vinieron y estuvieron y dieron su testimonio, porque no vino mucha gente, pero las personas que vinieron, las pocas personas que vinieron, les agradezco mucho que hayan venido, y también al personal que está haciendo la traducción. Gracias. So I just wanted to say that, thank the people who came out and gave testimony today. We didn't have as many people come out, which is sad in its own way, but those few people came out, took their time to come out, and the staff, we have a professional staff who is there to provide translation, so thank you.
Okay. In that case, I'd like to thank everyone on the committee and on staff for all their hard work and thoughtfulness, and I will adjourn. Oh,
You got it.
oh,
I just want to remind the board that at 6 o'clock now, tomorrow night, we have a work session. And you had
And-
homework.
And 6 p.m. next Tuesday night as well for board members.
and this is the handout on the supplemental budget
Correct.
process. And once that handout has gone around,
That's just informational.
okay, I will adjourn the meeting.